Jenny walked out of the apartment like someone who had already made every decision in her head. No shouting, no slamming doors, just quiet, purposeful movements. Bags zipped, papers stacked, every step measured. On camera, it looked almost serene. Then Sumit's face hit the screen. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Like the ground had suddenly disappeared beneath him. Years of waiting, promises postponed, and silent compromises all came crashing into that single moment. Every unresolved conversation, every softened confrontation, every delay that felt harmless before suddenly had a weight you could almost touch. Cultural expectations, family pressure, distance from her home, and a lifetime of compromise added invisible layers to the tension in the room. Could love alone ever survive this? Wait until you see why her calm hides years of silent storms. Jenny's story didn't start with fireworks or a dramatic confrontation. It began with deception. Sumit wasn't upfront. He introduced himself through a catfish profile, a fake face, a false setup. Most people would have turned and walked away, no questions asked. Jenny stayed. That choice set the tone for everything that followed. She stayed through lies, through uncertainty, through the unknown. That early decision became the rhythm of their relationship. Hope stretched thin, trust tested, patience worn down slowly over time. The secret marriage only added to the tension. Not secret from cameras, but hidden from his family. Jenny believed honesty had finally arrived, only to learn that truth had been delayed again. Each postponement reinforced the pattern. Wait a little longer, give it time, maybe next month, maybe next year. The age gap became another constant undercurrent. 30 years turned into daily reminders that she didn't fully belong. A subtle, constant pressure that weighed on her and anyone watching closely. Sumit's role was complicated. He wasn't cruel. He wanted peace, to keep his family happy, to maintain appearances. But in doing so, he relied on time to soften resistance. Every delay, every softened confrontation, every reassurance without follow-through created an invisible cost. Jenny absorbed it. Emotional labor, financial strain, social isolation. It stacked slowly, almost invisibly, until it became heavy enough to tilt the scales. The pattern loop emerged clearly. Delay led to reassurance. Reassurance led to calm, calm masked inaction. Inaction led to more delay. It looked harmless from the outside. On camera, viewers saw smiles, trips, little gestures of affection. But beneath that, the weight was accumulating. Every postponed conversation, every softened disagreement, every "we'll fix it soon" moment trained her to wait, to hope, and to keep absorbing costs that never seemed to be acknowledged. The audience had expectations. Reality TV thrives on explosions, on screaming, on ultimatums, on dramatic gestures that fill airtime. Jenny and Sumit didn't deliver that. Early seasons showed arguments, confrontations, tears, and emotional peaks. Later seasons showed calm, quiet resignation. Jenny's shift from arguing to silence was subtle but significant. Silence isn't neutrality. It's a signal. People don't stop speaking because they feel heard. They stop because the same fears repeated the same outcomes. Over years, her calm became evidence of exhaustion and resolve. She was no longer negotiating hope. She was assessing risk. She measured emotional energy spent versus energy left to give. Each quiet moment, each calm reaction, carried the weight of every previous delay. Sumit didn't see it coming because he mistook calm for stability. He believed patience meant forever, that time alone would soften every resistance, but patterns, when repeated long enough, eventually harden. Silence starts shaping reality instead of reflecting it. The cultural context added another layer. Jenny was far from home, navigating customs she didn't grow up with, and living under the scrutiny of family that didn't fully accept her. Sumit balanced loyalty, protection, and family expectations, often leaving Jenny as the one absorbing rejection. Every interaction, every postponed confrontation, every "we'll deal with it later" reinforced the invisible hierarchy of responsibility. Jenny stayed because she hoped marriage would change things, would shift dynamics, would force respect where delay had dominated. But marriage changed labels, not daily life. The ceremony added legal status, rings, titles, vows, but it didn't rewrite the family dynamics, the financial constraints, or the slow erosion caused by repeated postponements. Her endurance wasn't weakness, it wasn't submission. It was evidence of love, courage, and hope stretched over years. But endurance has limits. Love can persist, but it cannot replace protection, stability, or personal agency. Staying too long in a system that requires you to absorb discomfort without reciprocation becomes costly. Emotional labor, when unpaid and unacknowledged, turns into quiet suffering. Jenny's calm, over time, became her survival strategy. Every small smile, every polite interaction, every moment of composure hid a calculation she had been running in her head for years. How much longer could she wait before the cost outweighed the benefit? How many more postponements, delays, and soft reassurances could she absorb without losing herself? Sumit, on the other hand, operated in a world of past experience. He had seen patience work, seen time soften tension, seen hope extend cycles without immediate consequence. Every moment Jenny waited reinforced the belief that delay was harmless. He reassured, offered promises, and hoped that love alone would carry them through. That pattern became predictable. Delay became a comfort for him, a means to maintain peace and avoid confrontation, while it silently drained Jenny's energy and trust. He rarely raised his voice, rarely forced action. Calm gestures, gentle words, and soft reassurances became substitutes for real change. The longer it continued, the less visible the cost became until the final moment of clarity, Jenny's departure. Even fans noticed the pattern. Comments across social media praised endurance, patience, and long-suffering love. Some saw Jenny's eventual exit as betrayal, a failure to persevere, a lack of commitment. Others saw courage, agency, and self-preservation. That split reveals something fundamental. Audiences often project their own values onto the story. Those who value endurance praise staying despite cost. Those who value evidence-based decisions praise leaving when hope is exhausted. The story of Jenny and Sumit isn't just about them. It's a mirror for anyone who has struggled between hope, love, and self-protection. And the loop repeats. Delay leads to reassurance, reassurance leads to calm, calm hides inaction leads to more delay. The loop gave Sumit a sense of control, a sense of predictability. For Jenny, it became a trap disguised as routine. She absorbed costs silently, recalculating her own limits with each repetition. Over the years, this quiet erosion of stability made the decision to leave inevitable, even if her love for him persisted. She was not leaving in anger. She was leaving because the evidence no longer supported hope. Calm, controlled, packed bags, measured steps, her exit was the ultimate assertion of agency in a relationship that had repeatedly asked her to defer her needs. But this time, the old tricks don't work, and you'll see why. Patterns that protected peace for one side created quiet collapse for the other. Small gestures, soft reassurances, and patient waiting were no longer enough. The emotional labor that had been invisible for years became unbearable. Jenny had been playing the long game, silently calculating, and the final scene is just the tip of a much larger, invisible iceberg of compromise, hope, and delayed resolution. Every look, every pause, every quiet gesture before leaving had been rehearsed by circumstance, necessity, and survival instinct. She had learned to measure cost in years, emotional energy, and risk exposure. This context sets the stage for what happens next. The calm, composed exit is deceptive. It's not serenity. It's years of patience colliding with finality. Sumit's panic, confusion, and sudden urgency are natural reactions to a rhythm he relied on for stability. The old pattern, delay, reassurance, calm, has broken. For the first time doesn't solve anything. For the first time, hope is no longer enough to compensate for risk and emotional cost. Jenny's departure isn't just a single act, it's the conclusion of a carefully measured journey through deception, cultural pressure, emotional labor, and postponed confrontations. And as you watch, you'll notice every small detail that hints at the invisible work she's been doing for years. Every gesture pointing to the moment when love alone stopped being enough. This is where the real tension begins. Every smile, every promise, every calm interaction now feels like history. Every word Sumit utters in panic contrasts against the evidence Jenny has accumulated in silence. The setup is complete. A relationship that looks ordinary on the surface, but is built on repeated delays, postponed actions, and unspoken costs. And now the consequences are about to play out in full. You're about to witness how patterns shape behavior, how love collides with survival, and why one person's calm can carry more power than years of waiting ever suggested. But this time, the old tricks don't work, and you'll see why. This moment doesn't just ask who is right or wrong. It asks who survives, who protects themselves, and who pays the invisible price of years spent hoping. Jenny's exit is the story of endurance meeting evidence, hope meeting calculation, and love meeting the hard limits of personal safety. And the layers of tension, cultural expectation, and deferred accountability are only just beginning to unfold. Every audience reaction, every subtle expression, every silent calculation feeds into a deeper question. How long can love persist When one person absorbs the cost of delay for years, and more importantly, when does endurance stop being virtue and start being dangerous? But this time, the old tricks don't work, and you'll see why. This is where the pattern ends and the reckoning begins. The stage is set for the emotional, psychological, and relational collisions that follow. And it all starts with a calm walk out the door that hides decades of compromise, hope, and deferred confrontation. Jenny's calm as she walked through the airport terminal wasn't casual. Every step, every glance over her shoulder carried years of careful calculation. To an outsider, she looked serene, collected, even graceful. But inside, her mind had been running through every scenario, every possible outcome, every risk of staying versus leaving. Hope had been her companion for years, but it no longer outweighed the cost. Love remained, yes, but it was tempered now with self-preservation. She had measured every delay, every soft reassurance, every postponed confrontation, and finally realized that patience without progress isn't love. It's endurance at the expense of personal safety. Sumit, on the other hand, was caught in disbelief. He had relied on the same patterns for years. Delay, reassurance, calm. It was predictable. It was safe. Until now. The moment he saw Jenny's bags, her decisive step forward, panic replaced composure. His mind raced, trying to pull her back into the familiar loop. But the rules had changed. She wasn't negotiating hope anymore. She wasn't softening her stance with smiles and small compromises. She was operating from evidence, not expectation. This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. Jenny's decision to leave was layered. She wasn't angry, she wasn't seeking revenge. Every action was measured, quiet, precise. That calmness was her armor, her assertion of agency in a system that had repeatedly asked her to defer her needs. Emotional labor, years of absorbing delay, bending to cultural and familial pressure, smoothing over misunderstandings, had finally reached its limit. She didn't need to shout or dramatize. The weight of her composure spoke louder than any confrontation could. Sumit's panic unfolded naturally. He had built a sense of security around the assumption that she would wait, that time and reassurance would continue to maintain the balance. That balance shattered in an instant. He reached out, tried reasoning, bargaining, even subtly guilting. Each attempt met the quiet wall Jenny had built over months of internal reflection. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was evidence, a mirror showing him the cost of repeated delay. This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. The psychological stakes were enormous. Jenny had been dependent in ways she couldn't avoid: geographical distance, cultural differences, financial reliance. But her dependence never erased her agency. Each calculated decision to step forward, each pause, each controlled movement was her reclaiming power. Love had not disappeared, but it no longer demanded surrender. Sumit's reactions, panic, pleading, confusion, highlighted the difference between love under hope versus love under evidence. The quiet pattern that had allowed him control over pace and progress was gone, leaving raw, unmediated emotion in its place. Jenny's internal shift was subtle but seismic. She had been navigating cultural pressures, familial expectations, and the unrelenting cycle of postponed resolutions for years. That cycle had worn her down slowly, invisibly. What looked like calm was, in fact, the culmination of private struggle. Every time she had absorbed delay, every time she had ignored her own needs for the sake of harmony, she had been training herself to measure cost versus benefit. Now her calculation was complete. Staying would cost more than love could provide. Leaving would cost grief, yes, but it offered stability, predictability, and control. Sumit's struggle was almost the mirror image. His love was genuine, but it was framed in a world of delay. Time had been his tool to manage conflict, and he had relied on the pattern to maintain equilibrium. The sudden break of that pattern left him vulnerable. Panic isn't irrational when the system you've depended on collapses. His emotional response, reaching out, confusion, attempts at negotiation, showed someone realizing for the first time that his assumptions about patience, hope, and endurance were flawed. This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. Watching them unfold, the audience feels tension in multiple layers. Jenny's quiet composure contrasts with Sumit's visible agitation. The camera captures the micro-expressions: the tight jaw, the slight tremble of the hand, the subtle avoidance of eye contact. Every moment is evidence of hidden labor, emotional energy expended silently for years, now surfacing in a single decisive act. The emotional economy of the relationship is suddenly laid bare. Who has been paying the cost and who has been protected by delay? Jenny's inner world was governed by calculation. Love, hope, desire, all present, but filtered through the lens of survival. She had considered every argument, every counterpoint, every reason to stay. But patterns don't just govern relationships, they govern perception. The repeated delays, reassurances, and calm interactions had taught her that words alone could not change reality. Evidence did. And the evidence said it was time to leave. Sumit's internal struggle was equally revealing. His love had never diminished, but it had been tested by years of waiting. The realization that his patterns no longer ensured outcomes was shocking. Panic replaced predictability. Hope alone could no longer sustain the system. The quiet storm Jenny had been managing internally now collided with his visible distress. Every audience member watching experiences the tension. Who is really in control? Who has the power? This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. The interplay between dependence and independence defines this story. Jenny's physical presence in India, her financial reliance, her emotional investment, all forms of dependence were real. But her mental and emotional independence had grown steadily over years of internal negotiation. Each decision, each act of composure was a small reclaiming of power. Love existed alongside agency. Survival coexisted with attachment. This duality created a tension that viewers could feel, even if it was subtle. Calm on the outside, storm on the inside. Sumit's position highlights a common dynamic in long-term relationships. One partner, operating on hope and familiarity, assumes patterns are permanent. The other, absorbing emotional labor, eventually recalibrates expectations. When the system finally breaks, the sudden transparency of hidden labor, deferred needs, and unspoken sacrifices shocks both the other partner and the audience. Jenny's calm is no longer just a personality trait. It becomes a strategic, protective act. This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. By the time they reach the airport, the stakes are both external and internal. Passengers, cameras, and public spaces frame the physical act of departure. But the real drama lies in the invisible. Years of compromise, delayed confrontation, repeated emotional costs. Jenny's inner narrative has reached its endpoint. Sumit's panic signals the collapse of an old system. Audiences watching this understand the tension because they have seen it build across episodes, through subtle cues and repeated patterns. Jenny's survival instincts, once private, now manifest in decisive action. Sumit's attempts to restore the pattern are futile. His panic demonstrates the illusion of control delay once provided. Love, as he practiced it, relied on hope and patience. Jenny's love now relies on evidence, calculation, and safety. The shift is almost imperceptible until the moment of departure, but its effects are seismic. This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. In the midst of public observation, the private struggles of these two are exposed. Jenny's composure is a masterclass in silent resolve. Sumit's urgency is a textbook example of someone whose system has collapsed. Their interaction creates tension, empathy, and reflection in the audience. Viewers begin to see patterns beyond drama, the slow accumulation of emotional labor, the unseen negotiation of personal needs, the hidden toll of postponed resolution. Jenny and Sumit's story challenges assumptions about love and patience. It asks hard questions. When does endurance stop being admirable and become harmful? When does love need to step aside for personal well-being? And who truly holds power when patterns have governed behavior for years? The answers aren't simple, but watching their quiet struggle unfold brings those questions into sharp relief. This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. As the departure unfolds, Jenny's internal shift reaches its peak. Calm, measured, and resolute, she has converted years of endurance into a single assertive act. Sumit faces the collapse of the patterns he relied on, his panic visible and raw. Emotional labor, independence, dependence, hope, and survival all collide in the moment. The audience is left gripping every second, watching the interplay of agency, love, and evidence. By the time she is gone, the invisible struggles become painfully visible, and the real story, the one about power, patience, and personal limits, is fully revealed. This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. The moment is more than a scene. It's a study in human behavior. Jenny's calm asserts the power of agency built through emotional labor. Sumit's panic illustrates the fragility of systems that rely on hope without follow-through. Together, their interaction highlights the tension between love, survival, and delayed consequences. And for viewers, it raises an unavoidable question. If you were in Jenny's shoes, how long would you wait before calm became your final answer? This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. The stage is now set for the public and social fallout. Audiences will react, fans will debate, and the ripple effects of private struggles exposed in a public arena begin to take shape. But at its core, this moment is about agency, evidence, and the emotional cost of delay. Jenny has stepped into clarity. Sumit faces the consequences of prolonged inaction, and viewers are left to grapple with a fundamental truth about relationships. Sometimes love is not enough to protect you from the cost of waiting. This part will make you question who really has control in a relationship. The moment Jenny stepped off the plane didn't just end a chapter in her life, it ignited a firestorm online. Fans immediately flooded social media with reactions that ranged from applause to outrage. Some praised her courage, calling it a long overdue act of self-preservation. Others criticized her for leaving, claiming love should conquer all. The threads were full of debates: endurance versus self-preservation, hope versus evidence, patience versus action. It became clear that viewers had split into two camps: those who admired calculated decisiveness and those who felt betrayed by calm silence. Jenny's quiet exit exposed more than her own choices. It exposed audience expectations. The online conversation showed just how much people project onto reality TV relationships. Calm, measured decisions are often read as indifference or coldness. Silence is interpreted as weakness or lack of emotion. But what viewers frequently miss is the emotional labor behind those choices. Years of compromise, waiting, and absorbed stress do not make headlines. They manifest quietly in moments like this. Jenny's composure, so easily labeled as detached, was actually the culmination of repeated evaluation and protection of herself. It's a lesson many don't want to admit. Survival and love can coexist, but they rarely get the same applause. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. Social media amplified the psychological tension viewers felt while watching. Fans dissected every facial expression, every hesitated word, and every subtle gesture. Comments ranged from "she's strong for leaving" to "he was never given a chance to fix things." The dichotomy showed something deeper: the human tendency to equate emotion with drama. Loud arguments and explosive confrontations often get more sympathy and attention than quiet, deliberate choices. Jenny's decision challenged that instinct. She proved that impactful moments don't always need noise. They need strategy, courage, and timing. Other couples on the show suddenly became reference points. Viewers started comparing patterns, pointing out how repeated delays often lead to invisible emotional tolls. Every postponed discussion, every softened rebuke, every attempt to wait it out had its consequences. Jenny's departure highlighted a universal lesson: the hidden cost of delay is real. Endurance without change is endurance in vain. Audiences could suddenly see the same cycle playing out in past episodes with different couples. A partner waiting, hoping, compromising, while the other continues the cycle of delay, intentionally or not. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. The debate wasn't just about moral judgment, it was psychological. Many viewers admitted they themselves had stayed too long in relationships, hoping things would change. Jenny's action struck a nerve. Her calm exit became a mirror, reflecting personal experiences of waiting, compromise, and delayed decisions. Empathy surged in unexpected corners online. "I get her now," some admitted. "I've been the one waiting and bending for too long." On it, the social reaction wasn't just about gossip. It became a broader conversation about boundaries, personal limits, and the courage to choose oneself. Of course, not everyone interpreted things rationally. There were threads full of conspiracy theories, exaggerations, and assumptions about betrayal. But even in exaggeration, Jenny's decision had power. It forced viewers to think critically. Can love truly thrive if one partner absorbs cost without reciprocation? Can calm silence be more telling than words shouted in frustration? And importantly, what do repeated patterns teach about long-term compatibility? Her departure wasn't just a dramatic TV moment, it was a psychological case study, broadcast to millions. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. Fans also pointed out cultural and familial pressures that framed Jenny's decision. Cross-cultural relationships on the show are notoriously complex, with expectations layered over language, family loyalty, and tradition. Social media discussions highlighted how these pressures shape endurance and influence when someone finally decides to reclaim agency. Many recognize that leaving quietly is not just a personal choice, it's a statement against systems that demand patience and compromise as proof of love. Jenny's action became a symbol of asserting personal boundaries, and viewers debated whether they would have the courage to do the same. The humor and wit of the commentary could not be ignored either. Memes flooded Twitter and Instagram, poking fun at Sumit's panic, exaggerating Jenny's calm, and joking about the repetitive cycles fans had come to recognize. One viral comment said, "She left so quietly, the airport didn't even notice the earthquake she caused." Another joked, "Sumit just realized patterns are not guaranteed." Humor softened some of the tension while still reinforcing the underlying lesson. Visible reactions often mask deeper truths about emotional labor and decision making. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. Interestingly, empathy and critique often coexisted. Some viewers understood her need to leave, yet still questioned whether a confrontation or emotional conversation should have happened first. Others argued that patience is a form of love and that leaving without drama risks underestimating emotional connection. These conversations weren't just about Jenny or Sumit, they were about the rules of engagement in relationships and what it truly means to balance love, hope, and personal safety. Social media became a collective debate hall, dissecting motives, evaluating decisions, and projecting personal experiences. Patterns in audience reactions mirrored the very patterns Jenny had experienced. People praised endurance publicly while privately recognizing its dangers. They criticized departures while secretly admiring the courage it takes to step away from a cycle that no longer serves personal growth. Her calm, measured exit had created a microcosm of the very emotional cycles she had been navigating for years. This ripple effect is why the discussion became viral. It forced a re-examination of assumptions about love, patience, and emotional cost. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. Through all of this, the broader lesson became clear. Emotional labor is invisible until it is broken. Patterns are only visible when disrupted, and calm decisions can speak louder than drama. Jenny's story reminded viewers that patience has limits, love has boundaries, and endurance without change often carries hidden costs. Fans debating the moment online were, but in essence, grappling with the same lessons that had shaped her choice. How long can one wait before survival becomes the priority over a hope? How do patterns define relationships, and what happens when someone finally steps outside them? Even weeks after the episode aired, discussions continued. Memes were shared, commentary threads grew, and reaction videos proliferated. Jenny's departure quietly reshaped the conversation around cross-cultural relationships, emotional labor, and delayed action. Fans analyzed past episodes with fresh eyes, often realizing that similar patterns had repeated unnoticed. The online reaction became a case study in human behavior, emotional strategy, and the social interpretation of calm versus drama. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. In the end, the public and social response highlighted more than gossip. It highlighted learning. Jenny's quiet exit sparked debates about endurance, courage, and personal limits. It challenged viewers to reflect on their own relationships, to recognize hidden costs, and to understand the weight of delayed action. The polarized reactions, witty commentary, empathetic insights, and relentless pattern recognition reinforced the universal truth her story revealed. Sometimes walking away quietly is louder than staying loudly. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. Fans were left asking themselves, would they have waited as long as Jenny did? Could they recognize their own silent storms? And perhaps, most importantly, what does it take to finally step forward when hope no longer outweighs cost? Social media captured these questions in real time, amplifying her story beyond the episode and into the collective consciousness of viewers everywhere. Jenny's calm, deliberate exit wasn't just a personal choice, it became a lens through which millions examined patience, love, and self preservation. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. The discussion also drew attention to Sumit's position. Viewers empathized with his shock, confusion, and panic, understanding that patterns can give a false sense of security. The juxtaposition between his reactive behavior and her calculated action created tension, conversation, and debate. Fans speculated on whether he would learn from this, whether future relationships would see similar cycles, and how patterns of delay influence emotional perception. Jenny's departure had become a catalyst for reflection not only on her own life, but on the way relationships function under prolonged pressure. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. By the time the dust settled online, the polarizing reactions revealed an underlying truth about human behavior. Calm decisions, long-term endurance, and evidence-driven choices are rarely understood at first glance. Jenny's choice forced the audience to confront their own biases. Why is drama applauded more than composure? Why is silence misread as weakness? Her quiet, deliberate exit became a touchstone for discussing emotional labor, agency, and survival, proving that impactful actions do not need to be loud. They need to be meaningful. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. In short, Jenny's story didn't just end with a plane ride. It continued in tweets, comments, and heated threads. Social media revealed everything that a camera couldn't fully capture: the debate over endurance, the respect for personal agency, and the recognition that leaving quietly can be more profound than any on screen confrontation. Fans dissected, debated, and learned from her choice. Her calm exit became both a mirror and a lesson. Love can remain while patterns break, and sometimes the most shocking moments are the quietest ones. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. The ripple effect continued as viewers compared other couples, examined recurring patterns, and questioned their own thresholds for patience. Jenny's decision became a point of reflection for everyone watching. The narrative wasn't simply about a breakup, it was about understanding how delay, emotional labor, and personal boundaries interact in relationships. Her quiet departure exposed the silent storms many endure, the risks of staying too long, and the strength required to finally act. Fans realize that leaving isn't always betrayal. It can be the clearest form of care for oneself. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. Even as debates raged online, the lesson remained: endurance has limits, calm is evidence of resolve, and leaving quietly can redefine the narrative. Jenny's departure became more than a TV moment. It became a conversation starter about love, survival, and the invisible costs of delay. Social media reactions, both critical and admiring, demonstrated that viewers could finally appreciate the subtle power of deliberate, thoughtful action. The quiet act of leaving spoke volumes, leaving the audience to grapple with a question they had avoided for too long. When does love give way to self-preservation? You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. Fans, critics, and casual viewers alike were forced to reassess expectations of reality TV relationships. Jenny's calm exit had challenged the archetype of explosive drama, proving that emotional intelligence and calculated decisions can be just as riveting as chaos. In watching her step forward, viewers experienced a lesson in patience, cost, and personal agency. Online reactions amplified that lesson, turning private choices into public reflection. Her story became a blueprint for understanding the hidden patterns in relationships, the cost of delayed action, and the courage it takes to finally reclaim one's life. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. By the end, Jenny's quiet departure had left an indelible mark, not only on Sumit but on the audience as a whole. The social media storm revealed the universal struggle between hope and evidence, love and survival, patience and action. Her choice created ripples that went far beyond the episode, sparking discussions that were emotional, psychological, and deeply human. And in that quiet act of leaving, the true story emerged. Sometimes the loudest statements are made without a single word. You won't believe the online reactions to her leaving quietly. Jenny's first days back home were quiet but profound. No cameras, no drama, just the rhythms of life she had been craving for years. Waking up without uncertainty, planning her day without navigating constant delays, even deciding on the smallest things without negotiating or compromising, it was liberating. For the first time in a long while, she could measure life in her own terms. Relief was visible in the subtle ways she moved, the calmness in her tone, the small smiles that hadn't appeared on camera for months. Stability wasn't flashy, but it was tangible. She reconnected with friends she had drifted from, leaned on family, and began filling spaces that had been left empty during her emotional labor. The difference wasn't dramatic, but it was seismic. Every tiny decision she could now make without second guessing added a sense of ownership over her life she hadn't felt in years. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. Meanwhile, Sumit was processing the shock differently. At first, panic dominated his reactions. How could she leave quietly, calmly, without a fight? Cameras had captured his confusion, his pleading gestures, and the frantic attempts to explain or reconcile. But once the initial shock wore off, a slower, more painful realization set in. Patterns he had relied on, waiting, softening, delaying, were now exposed. The very system that had maintained his sense of control had failed. Suddenly, every postponed conversation, every reassurance that felt meaningful in the moment, now looked like a chain of inaction. Sumit began to recognize the cost of delay, not just emotionally, but practically. He had been clinging to hope as if it were a strategy, unaware that hope alone cannot replace evidence of change. For Jenny, the cost of departure wasn't just relief, it carried grief, nostalgia, and moments of doubt. Even in her newfound stability, she remembered the love, the shared moments, the promises that had once made her wait. Emotional labor leaves traces. Even self-preservation requires a reckoning with loss. But unlike before, she was navigating these feelings on her own terms with clarity and purpose. The weight of compromise was lifted, replaced by the empowerment of agency. Every day reinforced a simple truth. Enduring without change is endurance at a cost, And stepping away doesn't erase love. It preserves it in a way that protects the self. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. Sumit's journey unfolded more publicly. Friends, family, and fans all chimed in, providing both support and critique. Some pointed out patterns he had ignored, others offered advice about accountability and growth. Sumit had to confront not just Jenny's absence, but his own contribution to the cycle. There was no villainy in this realization, only learning. The irony was that the audience had judged him harshly in the immediate aftermath, labeling him helpless or passive. Yet the reality was more nuanced. His intentions had often been sincere, though poorly executed. Emotional patterns in relationships are rarely simple, and the aftermath highlighted that good intentions cannot replace timely action. Jenny's support systems were more than social. They were emotional anchors. Friends and family listened without judgment, offered perspective without pressure, and helped her rebuild routines that had been disrupted by the cycles of delay. She could pursue personal goals, set boundaries, and measure progress on her own terms. The contrast between this and life in India with Sumit was stark. The calm she now experienced was the direct result of reclaiming her agency, not of detachment or indifference. Viewers who criticized her for leaving quietly often overlooked this nuance. Strength is sometimes silent, subtle, and steady. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. Sumit, on the other hand, experienced delayed consequences more painfully. His realization came in fragments, small reminders of routines they had built together, encounters with mutual friends, moments when he expected her presence but found absence. The absence was louder than any confrontation could have been. Emotional patterns became visible when disrupted, and every previous act of delay now seemed consequential. Fans online revisited past episodes, pointing out cues he had missed, patterns he had underestimated, and moments where small choices could have prevented larger consequences. It wasn't humiliation. It was a mirror for reflection. Jenny's relief was coupled with subtle introspection. She acknowledged moments when hope had kept her waiting longer than necessary, when love blurred lines with tolerance. But instead of self-blame, she framed these as lessons in resilience and emotional intelligence. Learning the boundaries of endurance, recognizing patterns in others, and distinguishing between hope and evidence became her tools for future relationships and personal growth. What viewers often misread as calm indifference was actually a disciplined, thoughtful approach to reclaiming life after prolonged emotional labor. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. Sumit's process, though slower, mirrored these insights in a different way. Accountability was not immediate, and regret often coexisted with confusion. He confronted the tension between intention and outcome, realizing that being reactive without strategic insight prolongs cycles of harm. Patterns of reassurance without change can create a false sense of security, and emotional labor unacknowledged quietly accumulates. Sumit's journey highlighted the universal lesson. Even love with the best intentions requires action, timing, and respect for the other person's agency. The aftermath also revealed dramatic irony. Viewers had judged quickly, fueled by social media outrage or memes, assuming that Jenny's calm meant she was heartless, or that Sumit's panic meant incompetence. Reality proved more nuanced. Jenny's decision was rooted in survival and clarity. Sumit's response was informed by habit and hope. Both were acting within the constraints of their experiences, values, and emotional investment. The story reminded the audience that the truth is rarely black and white, and emotional consequences are rarely instant or dramatic. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. Jenny's narrative going forward centered on building life with predictability. She could invest in work, friendships, and self-care without waiting for validation or resolution from someone else. Each step reinforced a lesson about the limits of endurance, the cost of delayed action, and the power of quiet decisiveness. Meanwhile, Sumit's narrative became a reflection on growth, understanding patterns, recognizing the invisible labor in relationships, and facing the consequences of choices not acted upon promptly. Their stories, parallel but separate, illustrated that there are no villains, only people navigating complex emotional landscapes with varying degrees of awareness and skill. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. In the weeks after her departure, Jenny reported small but meaningful victories, scheduling life without negotiation, reconnecting with personal goals, and experiencing emotional relief that was previously unimaginable. Every step reinforced that leaving quietly does not diminish emotional depth or love. It preserves personal integrity. Sumit, conversely, had to face the quiet consequences of delay, realizing that patterns tolerated for months or years suddenly held tangible costs. The narrative's impact wasn't in dramatic explosions, it was in measured reflection, slow learning, and recognition of emotional truth. Both experienced cost, but both experienced growth. Jenny gained stability, autonomy, and clarity. Sumit gained awareness, accountability, and perspective. The audience's initial judgments often miss this, but the aftermath highlighted fairness. No one was purely wrong, no one was purely right. It was a story about choices, timing, and emotional consequences. Patterns exposed, lessons learned, and human complexity revealed that strength and weakness are often subjective, contingent on context, and most visible in aftermaths, rather, than instant reactions. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. Ultimately, the episode and its social fallout left viewers with more than entertainment. It left insight. Jenny's quiet departure, Sumit's delayed reckoning, and the subsequent social reactions highlighted the hidden costs of delay, the power of agency, and the subtle strength in calm decisiveness. The dramatic irony, judgment before understanding, underscored a key takeaway. Emotional labor accumulates silently, patterns persist unnoticed, and leaving thoughtfully can be a more powerful act than staying in chaos. Both stories carried lessons, neither story had villains, and both illuminated the human struggle between love, patience, and survival. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. By the end of the aftermath, the narratives had evolved. Jenny's life became a template for reclaiming stability, while Sumit's reflection illustrated the impact of delayed action. The audience was left with a nuanced understanding. Endurance is not always admirable, panic is not always incompetence, and calm is not always indifference. In relationships, consequences unfold gradually, and sometimes the quietest choices make the loudest statements. Jenny's exit quietly redefined the dynamics, revealing that the strength of a decision is measured not in spectacle, but in the restoration of life, agency, and peace. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. The ripple effects lingered. Social media discussions continued, but with a more thoughtful tone. Viewers analyzed past patterns, revisited their judgments, and debated the line between hope and evidence, love and survival. Jenny and Sumit's story had become a case study in human behavior, emotional cost, and delayed action. Their aftermath emphasized fairness, nuance, and reflection. Both experienced emotional consequences, both learned lessons, and both illuminated the truth. Patterns matter, timing matters, and sometimes walking away quietly is the most courageous act of all. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. Jenny's quiet triumph, Sumit's reflective growth, and the audience's gradual understanding completed the arc. The consequences were real, the lessons clear, and the emotional payoff deep. By stepping away, Jenny claimed more than freedom. She claimed clarity, agency, and a blueprint for living without unnecessary emotional compromise. Sumit's reckoning reminded viewers that inaction has consequences, even when motivated by love. The aftermath, layered with nuance and reflection, left everyone questioning their own patterns and appreciating the subtle but profound power of intentional decisions. This is where the story flips. What looked like weakness is actually strength. By the end of this story, the lesson is clear. Enduring without change comes at a cost, and leaving thoughtfully is not failure. It is agency. Jenny's quiet departure wasn't dramatic, but it carried a weight far heavier than any argument or public confrontation could. Love was present, hope lingered, but her choice showed that survival, stability, and self-respect cannot be postponed forever. Meanwhile, Sumit's delayed reckoning exposed the hidden consequences of waiting too long, even when intentions are good. Patterns matter, timing matters, and emotional labor, though invisible, accumulates until it can no longer be ignored. Viewers are left reflecting on their own experiences, questioning how long hope should outweigh evidence, and whether silence can hide more than it reveals. Relationships are messy, but there is wisdom in recognizing when endurance ceases to protect and begins to harm. Understanding the subtle costs of waiting, compromise, and deferred decisions is as important as celebrating the moments of love and connection. And just when you think the lessons end here, another couple is about to face the same pressure, the same tension, the same ultimate question. How long is too long? And who will make the first move to protect themselves?